My name is James Trost, and this is A2 Insight. Today's guest is Washtenaw County Sheriff Jerry Clayton. Welcome to A2 Insight.
Hi, Jim. Thanks for having me.
We're very glad to have you here. I want to give a little bit of background about our sheriff and then get into the questioning right away.
Okay.
Mr. Clayton grew up in White Plains, New York. He's the oldest of three children. His parents have been married now 50 years. He's a graduate of Cooley High School in Detroit and also has a degree in organizational management or leadership from Eastern Michigan University. He's been with the Washtenaw Sheriff's Office for over 20 years and was elected sheriff of this county in
2008.
2008. So 9 years you've
Yes.
been the sheriff of our county.
Right.
That's very exciting. Why don't we start out by, could you give us a little bit of information about your background, what it was like growing up in White Plains, being the oldest of three, and your progression here. Let's get you through high school and what your life was like growing up.
So it was interesting. White Plains, where we grew up, was very diverse. Good school system. I loved it there. My dad worked for an automotive company. Ended up getting transferred to the Detroit area. So of course, where dad goes, the family goes, and we ended up in Detroit right around the middle of my freshman year in high school. And the challenge was I played a lot of sports, had a lot of friends, so it was tough leaving there. But really, the bridge for me was sports. So I went to Cooley, got involved in the sports, and really made friends, and some lifelong friends. And quite frankly, I was recruited in football. So I was recruited a little bit by Michigan, met Bo and all that stuff. But I wasn't quite that caliber athlete. But I was also recruited by Eastern. And I'd never heard of Ypsilanti. Matter of fact, I couldn't even pronounce it when I first got the letter. But Ypsilanti and Eastern worked out perfectly for me because it wasn't too far from home, but it was far enough for me to start to exercise some independence. And the good Lord had something in favor because I've been here now since coming to Ypsilanti in '82. Met my wife at Eastern. We've been married for over 30 years. We're raising 3 sons, so it's really been a great experience.
Well, that's fantastic. You went to Eastern initially to play football. And somehow found your way into organizational leadership as an academic discipline. What was your motivation for this specific area of study? What attracted you, I guess, to this specific area?
So, if I go back, I don't know if it was anything specific, but there's always been this interest in people that impact others. So my dad had an impact on me. My grandfather, although I grew up in White Plains, New York, I was born in Alabama. And I spent summers with my granddad and listening to him around the civil rights movement, and he talking about leaders and King and all those folks. And my football coach was a leader, and he impacted me. So it was really all about people that make impact. And I didn't understand at the time what we really meant about organizational leadership. But the more and more I've gotten into it, I understand that you're not a leader just because you say you are. You're a leader because you influence people to do things that they would not normally do. So that's always intrigued me. And in the position I'm in now, I've tried my best to practice effective leadership.
Well, I'm just saying, I think for a younger person, it's not business, it's not political science, it's not history. It was a very specific major in that sense of terms of, at 20, you're thinking about organizational structure, organizational leader. That's quite interesting.
Well, it was a sports thing, too.
Okay.
So it was really, again, it was sports. So it was my coach. It was the captains on the team. And in high school, I was a captain. And at Eastern, I didn't have a formal leadership role, but I tried to have a leadership role. But also, I watched the coaches and everything else. And quite frankly, I'm just intrigued by situations where other people can influence people to do, as I said, things they wouldn't normally do. Now, as I've gotten older and more experienced, it's more than just that. Having a vision and having strategies to exercise that vision and motivating people to want to perform their best. So all of this stuff has always intrigued me.
Well, after you graduate or attend Eastern, you're attracted to the police work, right? That's an interesting transition. What was the motivation to finish your education, academic, and then go on to working initially in this county? Is that correct?
Yeah, so I'd like to say it was all part of this grand scheme, but it really wasn't. I was working in the sheriff's office part-time during the summers because the coaches wanted us to be close to working out and close to home. So again, part-time, met my wife. We got married, started a family, and it was all of a sudden, well, and I was offered a full-time job at the sheriff's office. So just like a lot of people, I was like, well, I'll do this for a minute while I really figure out what I want to do with the rest of my life. And when I got into the sheriff's office, I started working in corrections. I got to a point in my life where I said, well, I'm either going to stay with the sheriff's office or I'm going to go do something else. I applied with the state police. I got accepted. And then going through the process, I remember going to an orientation where I found out they can put you anywhere they want in the state. And I'll just be honest with you, I didn't want to go to a place I didn't feel comfortable. So I decided to stay with the sheriff's office. And once I decided to stay with the sheriff's office, my motivation then was, can I get into a leadership position? Can I start to try to change some things within the sheriff's office? And I had a very good, and I was very fortunate for 20 years to move through the ranks of the sheriff's office.
During those 20 years, something, as you grew within that organization, you decided at some point that it was time to maybe grab the helm. I mean, that's a big leap, it seems to me, from going from in the organization to being really, quite frankly, a public official. What was your motivation back in 2009 to then decide, hey, I'm gonna put my hat in the ring and run for sheriff of this county?
So, I spent most of my career under Ron Scheibel, who was very successful, a very good sheriff. And then Ron was beaten election in, I think, 2000 by Dan Menzie, who just had a different style. And under Ron, I had progressed up to the level of executive in the sheriff's office. And I didn't fit under the new administration. It just was not a good fit. So I retired in 2000. So I had my 20 years in, and at that time, if you had 20 years, you could retire. So I retired, and I went off into the private sector. So I was doing some work with Lambert Consulting. I was doing some work for the Justice Department. So I really thought I was done. And things worked out the way they did in the sheriff's office, and I was actually recruited to run. So there were officials that came to me and said, look, we're looking for a different direction in the sheriff's office, and we think you can provide that direction. And quite frankly, it was a lot of soul searching. I said, do I really want to get into politics? Do I really want to bring my family into politics? But I'll say this: in Washtenaw County, we're fortunate. It's politics, but it's not politics like we know on a national level or even at a local level in other places. It really is about, well, what can you do for the people that you have signed on to serve? And I was fortunate enough to win that election in 2008 and take office in 2009 with a very clear vision of what is possible in the sheriff's office with the right kind of leadership and the right team. So it wasn't one of those situations, the dog chasing the car, and all of a sudden you catch it and you're like, holy cow, what do I do? We knew what we wanted to do if we were fortunate enough, and the people of Washtenaw County gave us the privilege to serve.
Well, as when you took the helm in 2009, and now we're looking at 8 years later, what would you say your vision that you've been creating since going to college and fascinated by leadership, what would you say have been some of the major accomplishments you've achieved over the past 8 years?
Oh, gosh. With the sheriff's office, so a couple things. When we took office, there was all this discussion around police services contracts. So, the sheriff's office provides police services to jurisdictions that don't have their own police departments via contract. So there was all this consternation and bad blood and people suing the county and all this stuff. So we came in, and there was already a committee set up, and I think we helped provide some of the leadership to get the contracting methodology in place. So now we know what it's going to cost. We know what the price is. We work out long-term contracts. So not only the county has predictability in terms of what their contributions are going to be to police services, but also our contracting partners have predictability. So I think that was a major accomplishment. The other accomplishment, I think, is changing the culture of the sheriff's office. So clearly understanding that we are a service-oriented organization, that we provide a service. And everyone we come in contact with is a recipient of that service. Whether we're arresting someone or changing someone's tire on the side of the road or holding that person in jail, there is a manner in which we're supposed to conduct ourselves and deliver that service. And I think organizationally, we've changed that culture. And that's a huge thing to do. And we knew it was going to take some time. So we're in year 9, and we really are starting to see significant return on the investment that we've had in terms of changing the organizational culture. So I think those are big things. And I know we're going to talk about this coming up. The other big, I think, major accomplishment that we have been a part of is getting this millage passed. And not just a millage so we can just get more money for folks for a very specific reason. I mean, we got significant challenges in Washtenaw County as it relates to mental health issues, substance use disorder, and selfishly for the Sheriff's Office, how we were going to continue to fund police services contracts. So again, the people trusting, enough of the people trusting that they can impart more money to us and we're going to use it in the right way. And there's going to be significant return on investment. Those county dollars, I think, is really huge. This is a situation where the dog now has caught the car. So I thought the hardest thing was going to be to get the millage. The hardest thing is let's make sure we got the right strategies in place, that those monies are used in the right way, and that people in Washtenaw County see value.
Well, and that does go to what are the uses for these dollars, and I want to give a couple of specific examples of places that may need to utilize your creative abilities, and one would be the Washtenaw County Jail. One of the amazing statistics I found out is that violent crime's down somewhat in our community, but the incarceration rate, particularly for probation violations, young offenders, is growing. Seems to subsidize the jails, I think, at most half full in terms of the utilization. Well, okay, you've got additional funds, and I think a lot of us are aware that certainly mental health issues, these folks, we don't have various places anymore other than jails the folks end up. What are you hoping to do creatively and innovatively at the Washtenaw County Jail that might either not just lower recidivism rates or get, what do you hope to see with this increase in revenue for this specific, the jail population?
So a couple things. So the jail, we were jail built for our capacity is 404. Our average daily population is right around 350.
Oh.
But let's think about this in context. We're a county of about 358,000. If you look at the rest of the state, for our population, we have one of the lowest number of beds per capita in the state. And you'll never hear me advocate for more beds, because if you build it, we'll fill it. So there's a couple of things. So we have a very low bed utilization. We think we could drive it down lower. We know that about 50%, over 50% of the people in our jail are on some kind of psychotropic medication. So they don't have a severe mental illness, but they have some kind of mental health challenge that they're taking medication. We also know that a large percentage of those individuals have a dual diagnosis, some kind of substance use disorder. So we know that piece. We know that with the cuts that have happened at the state level, that mental health services aren't as readily available as they have been. And what we've started to see, although our population has averaged around the same, the construct of that population has been a little different. More and more people with mental health challenges. So not only in our jails, but our deputy sheriffs on the road are coming in contact with. So we know that at the county level, we have to be more proactive. So I'll give you some examples of what we believe we should be doing with some of those dollars. We believe we should have more of a comprehensive strategy where people that have mental health challenges are addressed on the front end, more proactively. That if we as first responders come in contact with them, as opposed to right now the only two choices we have, if there's a criminal behavior, they end up in jail. If it's not as serious criminal behavior, they end up in one of our major healthcare systems. We have to have what we call a community crisis strategy. Where else can they go? Where's a place where they can go with the appropriate resources, get triaged and addressed and get stabilized so they can go back home as opposed to ending up in jail? So we're looking at programs like that. We're looking at programs that's called law enforcement assisted diversion for those with substance use disorder, right? So again, police officer comes in contact with someone. They have a small amount of drugs or paraphernalia. As opposed to them going to jail, if we know they have a substance use disorder, let's connect them to a case manager. Let's get someone that can help assess them, address. It's not only the substance use disorder that's impacting them. It's other things. It's housing. It's transportation. It's education. It's all those. It's trauma. It's depression. All of those things. How can we help that person navigate those issues so when they're ready to get off of the drugs, they're in a better position to successfully do that? So again, they're not reoffending. They're not committing crimes to feed a habit. So we're reducing victimization. We take someone that was less of a contributing member to the community and making them a contributing member to the community. But all of that stuff has to be done in a thoughtful, strategic way, and you need dollars to help do that. So, as quickly as I can in a broad brush, those are the type of initiatives that we're looking at. On the back end of the jail, regardless of our best efforts on the front end, there's still going to be people who end up in jail. So what do we do for those people that are re-entering? So we want to make sure we have really good programs in the jail now. We want to make sure they're more robust. We already contract with community mental health in the jail now. We want to make sure we are funding the appropriate programs for the issues that people have, and that there's what's called the warm handoff. So when that person leaves the jail, let's make sure there's appropriate programming and there's the appropriate construct of that programming in the community, so they transition right to programming in the community with the appropriate support structure. So again, they can successfully navigate their challenges so they're productive members of the community. It would be nice to say we'd work ourselves out of a job. I mean, that's what we should be striving to do. You know, I'm a realistic guy. That's not going to happen, but we should be striving to do that. And it's not just the sheriff's office. There, if you count the state police, 11 other police agencies in Washtenaw County, we have to find a way to collaborate around a very similar philosophy, working with our mental health, substance use, and community partners to make this happen.
Well, and that is, I think, leads to one of the, I mean, the millage passed overwhelmingly. I
Yes.
was really actually somewhat surprised.
So was
but
I.
One of the concerns of particularly the Ann Arbor property tax was that, well, this isn't just Ann Arbor.
Right.
This is a county-wide investment, and some people, well, why are we subsidizing some of these outer
Yep.
areas? And again, that with that issue with that was over, well, ultimately we are all living in a community.
That's right.
The border doesn't end at 23 and all these other places.
That's exactly right.
So this is really quite an ambitious plan that you have. I mean, some people might argue, well, you know, put them in, let's be more punitive. I mean, there's certainly there's a culture now that, you know, why are we coddling prisoners? I'm sure you've heard this
Yes.
nonsense, but I would say also, do you envision an increased investment in police officers themselves? I mean, your goal ultimately is to have less, but do you envision even an increase in sheriff's deputies going forward?
There
What's the
might
increase?
be a slight increase, but the millage dollars, we were really just trying to maintain what we have.
Okay.
So we knew over a period of time that the current financial architecture would not appropriately fund the number of contracts that we have if it was status quo. Mm-hmm. So the millage helps us stabilize the funding so we at least maintain what we have. Mm-hmm. There's always a need for the adequate amount of police officers and first responders on the street. But the enforcement isn't the only tool that a society has. Look, we've done the war on drugs. We've done the let's be super punitive and put everybody in jail. It does not work. You know, we talk about the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again. We have to break that cycle. So we have to get away from criminalizing mental health. We have to get away from criminalizing substance use disorder. We must make sure that the people that are a risk, that are a danger to the community, we want to make sure we have enough space to put them where they need to be. But everybody else, we must help them manage their issues without confining them in jail. First off, I don't think it's the right thing to do. I don't think it aligns with Washtenaw County values. Secondly, it's not the most efficient thing to do. It's $135 a day in our jail. And it's not because people are living lavish. That's just the cost of running the jail. When we manage someone outside the jail and community corrections, it's somewhere between $18 and $38 a day. So if we just do the simple math, it makes sense to find the appropriate population that doesn't need to be in jail, and let's manage them outside the jail.
That also is an interesting aspect of this. And one of the things that always fascinates about Michigan as a state, and we even, one of 6 states that actually sentenced youth who were 17 years old to prison when, you know, and I guess the hope for a future, and as a getting close to senior citizen age, we need to invest obviously in the economic growth and the employable skills of people in jail. And I have talked to a couple of folks who worked in the juvenile system, not in this county, but in Wayne County. And I don't know if this is one of the aspects of being innovative, but one of the concerns is that kids that are in jail or in the juvenile system tend, and you have experience in that, they're not interested in the traditional method of getting a GED isn't the ultimate goal. The skills, employable skills, seem to be a potential. I mean,
Right.
do you envision anything particularly for the juvenile? Because I mean, it hurts my 17. I know there are organizations trying to change our law. Why we're one of 6 states that
Right.
incarcerates this, and I'm sure that's not what you
Right.
believe in. But what specifically for the juvenile offender? Because this is kind of, we want to hold on. We don't want them for in life in prison. It's a nightmare. But do you see, you started in juvenile work, right? You've done that. What do you hope for them?
So I'm so glad you bring that up, because the other part of that is, so let's talk about it on both spectrums. We're also seeing a significant increase in teen suicide. So some of those dollars we believe should be, so as we think about this comprehensive approach to addressing, helping provide support for people with mental health challenges and all that, we can't leave out our young folks. So we've been working with the school district and executive director of mental health, who's been our partner in all of this, Trish Cortez, has already reached out to the school districts, and we're working with them in terms of trying to help identify kids with these issues, with trauma issues, and giving them the right support. Now let's go on the other end of the spectrum. Sometimes I think we forget. We should always be mindful and careful of the victims and make sure we take care of the victims and make sure people don't get re-victimized. But what we also know is oftentimes the people that are perpetrators were victims first. And they were victims of a system that failed them. They were victims of a system that failed to recognize the trauma that they experience on a daily basis. So, to that point, we're working now on a program called ACE, which is really around addressing this acute trauma that kids are facing at an early age. And there's this other program called Handle with Care. So for first responders, say we respond to a house, it's a significant issue that we know traumatized the kid. We should contact the school and let the school know, look, this child's going to come to your school. He just had a tremendous trauma. So when he goes to the school, or she, and maybe if they're acting up, maybe there's a reason for it. So if we're just focused on the behavior, then maybe there's a suspension or some kind of punishment. But if we understand the root cause of that behavior is trauma, then the school's in a better position to not overreact to the behavior, still got to address it, but also provide that kid the support they need to survive. So we believe that we have to start at a very young age, that we have to understand that we have to provide support in those communities. And we have to address the trauma that the people are facing in those communities if we're going to help those kids navigate those challenges and be successful. I believe if we start early, those kids that might not see a future, now at 17 or 18, if we started with them earlier, we can paint a better picture of them. If we had to help them address their trauma, we can give them a vision of what's possible, and they may be motivated to do positive things in their life.
Well, as I said, we would rather have them employed than sitting in a prison somewhere in Jackson or anywhere else in the state. This is very innovative. It certainly will fit in this county in terms of the hope for rehabilitative versus punitive measures. Right. How are you going to be able to quantify? We're increasing people who have their homes of a couple $100 in some instances to give this a chance. Do you have, and I looked at the millage and the proposal, I voted for it. I was a little bit skeptical. But we want, as citizens of this community, something specifically tangible as it relates to what this investment is going to be. So I know you can't give me real numbers, but I try to do this with a lot of my guests, where do you want to see, and I'm not going to go for, let's say 5 years. Mm-hmm. We've implemented this millage. You've been able to, through vision, organization, leading your people and getting this integration in the community.
Right.
What do you realistically and hope to see what this is going to produce in our county 5 years from now?
First off, I think it's a fair question. We've been thinking about this. So I'll just give you a couple things that I think we should be able to track. We should see the average number of people with severe mental illness incarcerated in our jail reduced. What percentage, I don't know yet because we haven't laid everything out. We should see the average length of stay of people with severe mental illness reduced in our jail. We should see, although recidivism is tricky because there's so many different factors that contribute to that, but we should be smart enough to identify as best we can the contributing factors and put systems in place to address that. We hope to see the percentage of people with mental illness that recidivate and end up back in jail reduced. Mm-hmm. So now that takes the partnership of all these different parties, because a lot of times what we see, people with mental health issues that recidivate, is usually because they're on probation and it's a technical violation. So what are the things that are leading to technical violations? Let's address that. So we should see that. We hope to see the percentage of people that are overdosing on opioids go down, and the people that die as a result of opioid abuse go down, because that's all collected in there. Those are, I think, are the major things. If we've got this proactive system in place, when the county had to reduce and when the state reduced their allocation to our community mental health, 350 people that were being served by CMH were no longer being served. We'd like to see that population and maybe even more than that start to receive those services again from community mental health. So there are some specific metrics, and we just met with someone yesterday we're going to bring in to help us, was from a technical assistance standpoint, to help us mine the right data so we can identify, so we know we're identifying the right population to put these programs in place for, not only in the jail but in the community. So we're going to get smarter as this goes, and we're trying to do it on the front end so we have some benchmark data so we can speak to some of the impact and demonstrate a good return on investment.
And that's encouraging. I guess that, this is you talk about organization. I mean, good Lord, you've got your department, you've got community mental health here, you've got all these ancillary services. I mean, there's an accountability portion to this. I mean, this was deliberately something for your department, I believe, in terms of the millage and other, the other aspects.
A piece of it. Mm-hmm.
A piece of it. But then, if it goes, is it community, what components, where are the people accountable throughout the system, and who's ultimately responsible if you're, contracting services for increased? I mean, I don't know if you've thought about that to see this chain of command, so to speak, or organization.
Right.
How are you putting all these pieces together?
So it's complicated in this sense. I'm just one piece. The larger piece is our county board. Okay. So obviously our board had to approve it and put it out there, so they have some accountability. When the board put the millage out, they also passed an ordinance that mandated a council to help them as they thought about how those monies would be spent, how some of those monies would be spent. We're doing the same thing, so we have a council that we're standing up, a mental health criminal justice diversion council, that will help us understand from a strategic standpoint what we should put in place. The other community partners that will be a part of some of these councils that will receive, I would assume, some of the funds and some of the things. There has to be a county piece for everyone. So if you're getting some of these funds as a result of the millage, there has to be some deliverables, right? Articulate for us the outcomes, our desired outcomes. How are we going to know if there's been some change because of our investment in you? So we have to put all that together. The money doesn't start getting collected until 18. You don't get it until 19. So we have some time to really be thoughtful and deliberate in terms of the strategy that we put out. So it's not just me. It's Trish Cortez, who's running CMH. It's the Board of Commissioners. Hopefully it's all the other leaders in all the other jurisdictions that got some of that money as a result of the millage. Some kind of commitment to being part of this network, to create, as part of this strategy. So I believe we all have a responsibility to ensure to the people of Washtenaw that every penny that you put in, there's a real investment. And we're doing the things we said we were going to do. And if not, the people will let us know, and they should hold us accountable for it.
Well, you have retired once before, and were brought back into our world after 20 years. Most people would love to be able to retire after 20 years of service. How long are we going to have you? I mean, the only fear would be, here you come into our county. We love having you. We're excited about the future. You really push for this. Where do you see you in 5 to 10 years? You got ambitions for other political offices? Or,
no.
What's your, I guess, with the citizens of Washtenaw County, are you going to be around, or you hope to be around as sheriff of this county?
I do. No, I don't have any ambition to higher office. Those conversations have been had. And look, and the reason is this. Way back in 08 and 09, we had a vision that, with the right kind of leadership, not just myself, but our entire team, we could make real impact in Washtenaw County. Not just in the public safety, criminal justice arena, but just overall. There's tremendous things that we can do. And I think we're demonstrating that. This millage, when we asked for 8 years, I've sort of committed to be around to make sure that the things that the citizens put in front of us are being done the right way. So my plan is to be here for a while. I love what I do. I've been blessed to do what I believe is one of the best jobs you can have. And I've been blessed to have a great family who's healthy, and the team that we have in the sheriff's office, I think is top notch. So there are many things, and I'm driven and motivated by pushing and change and all that. what the people of Washtenaw County has done in terms of approving this millage has given us the resources we need to push us to the next level. And I want to be around for that.
Well, Sheriff Jerry Clayton, I want to thank you very much for appearing on A2 Insight. This is certainly an exciting time for us here. We're glad you're going to be around for it, and thank you so much for appearing on our program.
Well, I'm really, really happy to be a part of this. I'm really excited to give a chance to just share a little bit about what we're doing and what we're planning.
For A2 Insight, until next time, I'm James Trost.